Thanks for the introduction. I'd rather have, let's say, if people have questions, please pop them up, because it makes this to a lively and interactive kind of a discussion. Whereas we are able to learn as lot as we can. There might be things that need to be followed up afterwards, because there maybe the answers is too in depth for the time, but then we'll come back to that later. I started in impact almost 10 years ago, when I was asked by a energy company to allow them to create a platform where they could, let's say, bring all the risks together that energy companies nowadays are facing, not only on energy transition, but also climate change, but also political impact. And there we created a simulation platform where we, made possible to really allow political people to make policy based on real information rather than gestures. Later on, I also invested in the Gemini company, where we had challenging pictures by AI on anomalies and making policy and operations on that one. And nowadays I'm together with Wouter Heine setting up the Circular Hub Algarve in order to see if we can support South local governments in their challenges on climate change, water, by interconnecting them with technology from, let's say, Northern Europe, where we do tech scouting and helping out on, the daily problems. And one of the solutions we offered is in the Portuguese water network, 30% of the water get lost during transportation only. And we introduced a AI and satellite data where you can detect anomalies in the landscape and really could find already the leakage in the network, allowing a government to proactively start managing that. As a result of that, I currently am in Carvoeiro in Algarve. Almost all Carvoeiro is like broken up on the roads because they're restoring all the network. But that's really where impact becomes very tangible, and there you can see that there are more and more people that are willing to invest in this impact kind of solutions. Because they want to help out, because we know we are all part of the challenge or the problem.
I have a short question only. Are you in contact with Juliette Douglas from the Dutch Water Alliance?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Thanks for connecting. Yeah. Maria, could you maybe share with us how your journey became into impact investment and what your experiences are, let's say, up to date?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation, Ella and Mark, and hello, everybody. My name is Maria Maso. I am Spanish. I'm currently living in Barcelona, but has been living the last 16 years abroad, the last 10 in Houston. And in Houston was where my investment experience in startups start. At some point, I think that everybody that became a business angel became because of personal reason or because something inside motivate you to make a change. And that was what happened to me. At some point in my personal life, I decided that I want to make a contribution on the health industry. And because I am not a doctor and I have no scientific background, I decided that through money or through capital was the best way to do it. And I joined one of the angel groups back in Houston and start to invest in startups on the medical file. That was 6 years ago. And at that point, I realized after a while that in Houston, we had a big gap between the amount of money that immigrants received in the city. In fact, it was not an issue in Houston. It was an issue in North America. The amount of capital that immigrants get for their startups and the amount of startups led by minority in the States. So with a couple of colleagues, we created BAMA. BAMA was a business angel organization that was immigrants investing on immigrants and focusing on clean tech, ag tech, and health tech. We invest with BAMA. I think we did 9 deals, all of them with SPVs. And it was kind of an issue, a kind of a big deal at that point of time. After that, we created different funds. And that was the first experience that I had with impact investment. But at that point, we didn't even name it as impact investment. We just invest in whatever was in our heart, and we started like this. Then I came back to Europe, and at that point, I joined Co-Rangers Barcelona. And I joined as well Women's for Esteem, investing on women, because that is something that is always close to my heart. And I joined as well We Rock, that is another organization of women investing on women, but in any type of entrepreneurship. And that is it. And I think that one of the big things here is to define what is impact, right? So because for me, impact, it's plenty of people say I invest in impact, and then the definition that they have of impact is maybe not the same that I have in impact, right? To me, to have impact, you have to have the triple rentability. You have to have a rentability, a social one, an environmental one, an economic one, and not just because you are in an impact sector means that you have an impact an impact venture. So plenty of people invest, but not all of it is impact for me.
And if you are now, well, you're now in Barcelona, you set up your platform. Can you share with us how this, what's the climate of, let's say, startups willing to develop impactful kind of solutions in Spain, or more specifically in Barcelona?
I think that there are plenty of them, and there is plenty of organization. For example, I was the lead of Ship2B for a while. Ship2B is an accelerator program for tech, for climate, and for health. There are plenty of startups that are trying to make an impact. The issue that they are getting is probably getting capital at certain points. So not to, I think that they arrive until a pre-seed, a seed round quite good, or with good financial health. But then getting a Series A or a Series B in Spain is kind of difficult. And at that point, they need to go abroad. Some of them make it in Spain. Some of them needs to go abroad. So, but there are plenty of them. The pipeline is good. The government is supporting the impact ecosystem a lot. For example, now we have this Cofides fund, that it's a public fund of 400 million that they are going to develop in impact startups through different VCs or through different organizations. So there is a lot of movement to support impact in Spain. And I believe that will make it grow in the next years.
Yeah. And you were talking about an ecosystem. In earlier days, people started looking at government to say, what are you doing on to create the impact on climate change or whatever? But we are learning that they can't do it alone. Basically, we're part of government ourselves as well, only in a different role. Can you share us a bit how those ecosystems then come together, and what kind of challenges you find when setting up and exploring them?
Sure. I think that, for example, right now we have different, for example, when we talk about the Tech for Climate, last year we had the Tech for Climate ecosystem, and we bring together different corporations like Akbar or Repsol. Akbar is the water company here in Spain. Repsol is the big oil company, the Spanish oil big company. Then we had as well some insurance company that joined us, and they were defining some challenges that they found in the industry. And then we will support in finding some startups, a little open innovation program to answer these challenges and find solutions for the challenges that the industry have, right? So this is how we were working last year. But what we realized and what we are working right now is that this needs to be more complex. And I cannot give you a solution because at the same time that at some point an LLC or a SL or whatever is the company organization was created at this point, is not created yet. But I think that at some point in the next 10 years or in the next between 5 and 10 years, we will see another type of organization that will be a multi-stakeholder organization where corporations, startups, governments, everybody will be together and will be together for a bigger cause, or for a bigger focus, for a bigger objective, like water, like climate change, like one thing, but will be very clear what is the benefit that each of them will get, and that will be regulated, and that will be transparent for everybody. At this point of time, we have plenty of actors that are trying to make people work together, but at some point, it's not really an organization, right? So at some point, we have the challenges of the real life. This is going to be created, I believe, in the next 5-10 years. The form of that, I am still not sure, and I'm not still sure which one will be the company that will be the leading on that. Probably Europe, because Europe in these things are quite advanced, bigger than or advanced than the States. But I don't have the answer for that yet.
No. We saw in the Netherlands that if you bring in, let's say, state-of-the-art technology for solving one of the impact challenges, that both government and private sector then wishes to have validation for that. So, and if you then go to university, you say, well, guys, can you validate the technology? And then they say, yeah, well, that take 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And well, looking in the Algarve on the water challenge, we cannot wait for 5 years.
Correct.
So you have to start being pragmatic. Is that pragmatism also, let's say, understood and felt in the ecosystem you're working in, or are we just going ahead and see what kind of other challenges we're facing?
Well, I believe that the pragmatism is understood. The problem is the P&L, right? At the end of the day, the P&L always have to work. And it's why when I think in impact, I believe that the metrics of impact are one of the keys for the success. And that the metrics of impacts have a direct impact in the P&L will make it go faster, right? So if you can see the impact the repercussion that impact will have in your P&L, then governments, corporations, private sector, startups, everyone will be aligned and will be quicker. When you don't see it just because it's what it needs to be done, at some point you always have someone that left the table, right? So I think that the key is have those metrics in your P&L and not overdoing it, because right now we have so many different metrics and so many ways to calculate everything, and you always have a side effect and a side effect of a side effect and a side effect. So at some point, people just get lost in the where they need to calculate the impact, right? So my point of view is that you don't need to overdo it. You just calculate something and ensure that it's included in your P&L.
All right, that's interesting. I saw that Rui raised a hand. Rui, come in, please.
Yes. No, it's a little bit strange in a certain way, listen, Maria, because I'm used to see impact investors as people of causes and with a long-term perspective. Then speaking about P&L in the short term, it sounds quite out of my idea what is the impact investors that are moved by causes, that normally cultural changes and things that take time to do. And how can an impact investor compatibilize the short term versus the long term? What do you think about it?
I think that for me, thank you for your question, Rui. I think that for me, before being an impact, I am an investor, right? And that is something that it's important. I do plenty of things in investment. So I have real estate, I have stock market, I have plenty of things. But when I am talking about ecosystem, when I am talking about impact investment, I am talking about ecosystem and startups. And I have a part of my portfolio that is venture philanthropy. And in venture philanthropy, impact goes first, goes always first. And over there, I don't expect a return. I expect to make an impact. And there are some ventures that really I cannot expect a return, and I am going for the long term over there. But when I am talking about impact investment, I am talking about investment that expect a return, right? And what I am saying, before being an impact, I need to have the triple rentability. I want to have the social and the environmental rentability as well, but I will need the economic as well. And I cannot forget that one, because if not, at some point, the money will be gone, right? So I need to have an investment that will give me a return in order that I can invest in the next one as well, right? And that is important. So, and that is the difference for me, Reid. So for me, one thing it's venture philanthropy, and when I invest in venture philanthropy, it's not philanthropy by themselves, because I expect that the money get back, but I expect that the money will be back with zero return. When I invest in impact investment, I expect that there will be some returns, and it's because of that I am talking about P&Ls.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Maria. Jeffrey. You are managing several portfolio as a general partner. What made you maybe change your way of thinking towards becoming more impact investment oriented?
For sure, happy to be here, and thank you for the questions. So it's kind of fascinating or interesting, because my impact journey started a long time ago from attending events in early 2010, 13, 14, which was March Against Monsanto's and all of these types of things that were going against the norms of what was happening in business, to myself being at the Paris Climate Summit in 2015, where they were tear gassing everybody. I was right in the mix of that and taking photos. So it was quite a crazy moment. But that's kind of where, if you look back at the journey, those things, I also started investing personally into companies that were looking at and focusing on how can they do better in the planet. And one of the first ones that pops to mind was a company called Flow Hydration or Flow Water. They were a Tetra Pak based company, and they were removing the idea of everything being in a plastic water bottle or a plastic container. And this was, again, back in 2013, 14, and made investment. And eventually they ended up going public. But I guess through this journey, when I started investing and creating the fund, which was what we do today in the Supporters Fund, you probably tend to want to focus in on impact right away and dive right into this. And when we created the fund, the tough part is that people are looking for where to invest their capital. They're looking at things that, just like you would invest in a founder, you want to understand their background. You want to understand where they came from, what they did. And because my background was in deep tech, fintech, and CPG, it was easier for myself to actually create a fund that was supporting those entities and those types of companies. So our first two funds were supporting that. And even inside of those two funds, we still made sure that when we were investing in companies that were making an impact, from ESG-based companies, microgrid technology, again, focusing on the same aspect of fintech, deep tech, and CPG, but making sure that when we did invest in these companies, they were adhering to SGD rules, regardless of our fund not being a fully impact. And then as the journey continued to grow and we started to have wins and started to improve and impress investors, that's where we decided to full scale ourselves into impact. And our third fund, after spending most of COVID traveling throughout Asia, Middle East, Africa, etc., started to realize that there was a lot of the same problems in every country. Everybody is dealing with pretty much the same waste, renewable soil, energy issues. And we thought, maybe we should stop looking at where we're making dollars and start looking at where we can make a more of an impact and more of a change, and fixate ourselves on products and solutions that will be sustainable and last a long time and be iterated on to become staple products in our environment. So we started to kind of dive into that, and we looked at it and said, where do we want to be in the next 10 to 15 years? And taking the background on the journey that we've been on, we decided to focus on climate and green tech in our third fund, but at the same time, even going a little bit more granular in the fact that we wanted to make sure that in our third fund, before we start to raise our fourth, is that we focused in on circular regenerative. Again, making sure that it's closed full circle. We wanted to make sure that all products at some capacity were being reused, and or it was in the plan for the next few years for that to happen. And we're finding that, maybe in the last 5, 6, 7 years, regenerative and circular certainly weren't making much of an impact. They were getting more crushed in the market. Businesses weren't getting past that seed to Series A round. And in the last 2 years, you're seeing a whole changeover on that, where these companies are starting to undercut markets on outputs. And that's where the part of it gets exciting, because they're able to offset their byproduct and sell those back to the markets and ensure that they're a full solution. And I think that's where it gets really impactful and exciting for our side on making investments.
Yeah. And following the last question of Rui, where you said, well, you have the short term, the P&L, and you have the long term to make the real impact. Is it then for you and your funds to focus on impactful topics rather than profitability, let's say, after Q1 or year one?
It's an interesting question, because when it comes down to any sort of investment, our brain always goes to what's going to make the biggest return, what company is going to scale in the future, and then how do we get behind it. But there's so much more that goes behind investing. Who's going to be follow-on investing? What gap is this actually filling? Is there someone that's going to acquire this company, and are we solving a problem for them? And I think sometimes we forget that in order for this company to receive the funding it needs, it has to have some form of impact regardless in the market of what they're selling into. And if they just build some cool tech, and I probably could list 1,000 techs that are rotting away in the sea that we're supposed to break down barriers from waves crashing in and breaking down shores, that are just sitting there rusting away in their useless tech to space junk, etc. And the fact is that the investors jump on this new idea, this new innovation that they think solves everything, but there's not enough backing. People haven't planned out who's going to come into the next round, who's going to acquire this company at some point. And when you start to look at it, that it's just about money, you see a lot of tech that dies. So we have a lot of innovation that's just gone nowhere because it never had the support. And a lot of the times, if you don't allow the people to make their money all the way up the food chain, this product doesn't get to market. So I think you really have to look at what you're investing in, how it's being supported, and can this actually make a long-term effect that this product will get reused and repurchased along the way because of the impact it carries. And I think that's where impact makes a difference. If you're looking at everything from a dollars and cents, probably nothing makes sense at the beginning when you're first money in investors, because all products are high in the sky ideas and concepts that we're just gamblers looking for the next best cool thing that we think is going to change the world and that everybody on this place wants to acquire or buy or be part of. So I think there's a lot more to the how investors should start looking at their investments, so that we aren't filling the world up with more junk. And just because Elon Musk invests in it doesn't mean it's going to take off and be of value. We have to look at where and who in this world is going to benefit from that technology, and can that leader actually take this company where it needs to go. So that's the whole mindset of invest in the A team with a B product, because they're going to take it somewhere. And if they're heavily influenced by impact, then they're going to ensure that that product is doing the right changes that it needs to. And if that means that in 10 years they're going to be 100% renewable, then that's where you're going to keep pushing them to make sure they're hitting those goals, and they're fitting them for not only for your own personal reasons, but for the world.
Okay, thanks. If you're looking on the investment, on technology development, innovations, you see that there's many people that have brilliant ideas, and that they most probably want to focus the rest of their life on creating brilliant ideas. And the more traditional thought was, okay, try organize something around those people to make it big. But then you see they never survive the valley of death, because there's always this conflict in, I want to develop continuously develop technology, whereas the let's say the support group wants just a go-to market. Would there be a different way to organize or to structure this in order to allow technology to be in an earlier stage more successful, and also replicable or scalable?
I guess in a way it does. Like if you kind of step a little bit further back and you look at roles of government in innovation or technology, and you wonder, would we be able to offset a lot of the way products get to market by having more test opportunities and having government fund those early stage tests? I think to your earlier question, when you're trying out all of this technology and which ones are going to be successful, and they tell you that it's going to take 3 years to create a white paper or to build something around scientifically if this is a proven tech that can make a change in the world. I do think it comes down to what that intervention is, and then how it gets supported going forward from there. So if government came in and supported by providing more test labs and more ability for technology to be tested, white papers created, etc., then maybe there might be a way to branch off a lot of that tech with founders being able to pull that, license it or whatever, and create products that would then be supported because it's data proven or proven through science, etc. So I guess in a way, throughout time, we kind of rush faster than we want because money is at the end of the stream. So a lot of tech does get pushed through because it's financially there, and I can go public with a SPAC, and I don't care if the company fails at that point because I exited, got my money, and moved on. And I think that's kind of how a lot of investment works. So perhaps the better way of looking at it is impact investors should look not just at the outside of what dollar they're going to make, but what change they can enforce through that process. And if they're investing and being selective to invest in companies that they feel are going to push this technology global, or see that it's making impact and how that is through regular measures and data points and publishing those, then maybe that's where you're getting a better value. And that company will have more success as well and more support from other governments.
Okay, thanks. Maria, you were discussing you brought in the, let's say, the European way of being potentially more successful. Jeffery, you're in the US. We're in Europe right now. Can you maybe share a bit on differences and maybe potential success when really start collaborating? Maria, do you have an example on?
I was thinking one of the things, and I have been just working in the European ecosystems for a year, so it's not that I am the best expert on how the European ecosystem works, but one of the big differences that I notice is how the startups here get much more support from the government. What Jeffrey was saying, right? If the government supports these technologies and the tech transfer gets a better funding at the beginning, probably those technologies will be more mature and they will not need private capital until much more later, and then they can develop and get a better fit at that point. That has pros and cons as well, right? I have never seen so many zombies like I saw over the last year and a half in Barcelona. Startups that should fail like a year before, and they are just getting more and more prices or more and more government money, and they continue and continue, and that is not good for anyone. It's not good for the entrepreneur, and it's not good for the ecosystem, and it's not good for the impact that they want to create, because if you need to fail, better to fail quick, right? So it's good in a certain way, because those entrepreneurs and those technologies and those startups are getting the money to get to the point that they are ready to arrive to private capital, and they go to private capital in a much better position, in a much better shape. But on the other side, which will be more restrictive on how we give that money, because if not, we create plenty of zombies around.
Yeah. Jeffrey, you have something to say on that?
Sorry, I do agree. I actually had this conversation on one of our podcasts where it was an Italian investor, and he works out of the UK and much of Europe, and he was hoping that the EU would reduce their regulations so that they can be more competitive. And he said that it's becoming so regulated that it's being very hard for them to compete with North American companies. And it's called the 60-second rant. And I think, my side to that and what I'd share today is that I think that without the way the EU regulates, manages, and governs data and the way the world works, we would be at an extreme opposite end with the US and other countries that would be utilizing AI and going to the full extreme. So I think that the regulating body that Europe provides in going in and diving into the companies that they're working with and regulating data and how everything is being transferred, and this goes through impact or any form of investment, I think you kind of need that regulating body. It may slow things down, and it may make it seem like it's not what you're doing is impossible and it's never going to happen. But I do think that if you're going full out in the US and getting that support and doing whatever you choose to do, I think in time it starts to get a little bit perplexing, where you've got doorbell cameras that can piece together every single person's walking movement, and we think that this is correct and that this is okay, whereas in Europe they say that's intrusive. And I would have to go with it is intrusive, and there's certain things that we're just allowing on a capitalistic market because we want to make money, and we're avoiding what the regulation should be. So there's a middle ground that's always going to be in anything we do. And I think that we have to be stewards of that and decide, are we willing to invest in things that are going to invade and ruin privacy and ruin the earth? Or is it all about money, and do we want to move quickly? So I think that we all have to find that middle ground. And once we do, I think that'll bring a lot more sustainable companies and less companies that are, as you mentioned, should have died years ago, that just haven't found their place. And I think we'll start to drop companies quicker and start going after ones that we think are actually making an impact and a change. And maybe to your point earlier, Mark, it's what does impact mean, and what is it really doing out in the environment versus this greenwashing and everything else that happens. And I think you can take it to an even further extent that the whole world is in crisis of every day because we all have to live in fear. But the crises are all the same. It's kind of odd that we're all in a housing crisis in every country we're in. Well, is that really the case, or is that just big business trying to make money? And if people started to look at it, it's just big business trying to make money. The crises aren't housing. The crises are the fact that we're wasting time polluting the earth and doing things that we shouldn't be doing. And maybe that's where we need to focus more of our time instead of trying to solve problems that are making big business money. Yeah,
I experienced these the same, but also the let's say the trapful government is in, that you have, it's all sectorized, and every sector has its P&L or its KPIs, and as long as they don't interfere, they're very much willing to collaborate. And as soon as that starts interfering, then the shit start hitting the fan.
Agreed. They all have to make money. And I think once we realize that every body you work with, from federal, provincial, local governments, businesses, everybody has to make money. And if they're not making money, they don't have an interest to talk to you. They don't want to work with you, and they don't want to solve your problem, which is, making this automated or garbage cleanup and automated this. It doesn't work for them because it costs them money, or they lose budget. So there's so many factors that go into all of this that you have to be always paying attention as a startup or as a business leader. How do I navigate through all of this? Because it really comes down to everybody has to make money or they're not going to exist. And government is the same. They have to make money. And if they're losing money on Airbnb, then they're making money on empty properties. Whatever it is, they have to make money, and they'll push the narrative they need in order to win. And it's your kind of goal to pick who you want to invest in that's fitting the right narrative that fits your principles.
Yeah, but it's also very interesting to find a common denominator on what really is the value of impact. Because on the money you can easily do it, because if it's like profitable, then it's okay. But how to value creating a more safer environment, or how to value a system in which things are not spent any longer, or spoiled any longer, or trashed any longer. What kind of value should you give it that? And we experimented in Holland with a governance model for digital twinning and those cascading effects. So you have a cyber attack on a sluice, and the city gets underwater. And there's many effects, and which one is more relevant, and what's the value of those soft kind of impacts. And there, I think we should start looking and in finding values for that, and then you can more easy interexchange those. Any of the participants having examples on this one? Or does it stay a trialogue?
I have a question. For you, Mark, Jeffrey, and Maria, either of you or all, do you have your own way or examples of how you measure or manage risks when it comes to investing in impact startups? Do you even approach this your investments in impact investing with like a methodology of measuring risks?
Maria, Jeffrey?
How much of it is like gut feeling, and how much of it is you know?
Well, we try to take away the gut feel by creating a digital twin in which you could calculate the cascading effects. So also a city flooding having to be evacuated. That brings a risk, and that risk you could value, but also property that also is flooded and that got a decrease in value, or companies that are not able to operate for a period of time. There you can calculate the risks, and if you interconnect, then you can allow people who really have to take a decision to make the right decision. And we sold this tool set to a reinsurance company. They reassess their value, their assets on 12 big potential crises, and based on that one, they have rearranged their portfolio. So there you can make it tangible, and that really went from flooding to mobility to aging, or people leaving the city, or sun or heat risks. So, but there you need data, and that is something touching upon what Jeffrey said. On the one hand side, we're very eager to protect our personal data, and as soon as it starts feeling inconvenient, we take the privacy rules into the hand. But as soon as you have a way to use private information anonymized to find anomalies in whatever kind of situations, they are good. But you have to explain, and that's what we learned, is that there should be more communication around these kind of impactful technology solutions. And that makes it very difficult, because now I'm talking to my mother, but I could also talk to the mayor, or I could talk to the head of the police, or I could talk to whatever people, and they all have their own interest. And there you have to find some kind of a common denominator to see, okay, you're fine if, and if then most of the boxes started to be ticked, then you can go ahead. Do people see that differently?
I would probably just add to that, and I think that's a very good summation of how you would look at different formats of risk. But I think also on the other side is that when we do analysis of making an investment into a company, we also look at called the food chain throughout. Who would invest in this product or this company? Who would use the company or use the product, but who would invest in this at later stages? And do those people and those businesses also adhere to our formats of investing? So if we are true to be ensuring that our companies are going to be 100% renewable or regenerative, or whatever the term might be that you're following behind your thesis, are the investors going forward that are going to come into that business, are they looking for that and seeing that that's a solution as well? And at the outcome is this technology going to get purchased and utilized by a bigger corporation, or are they going to get taken out because they're disrupting the way they're making money in the industry? So, I think there's a lot of factors here going to tie into risk. And risk isn't just about, is this company going to live to tomorrow? Who's going to be supporting it? And governments change their mindset around it. Like open banking was probably the biggest one that every government's fought with for decades. Are they going to allow for this open banking structure to occur? And, every day they get further and further along, but this has been a battle for over 20 plus years. And people think you're going to disrupt a bank that's pulling in 2 billion a quarter in profits or 10 billion a quarter in profits. Well, that's not going to change the industry anytime soon. So you've got a lot of room to grow. A lot of regulations you're going to surpass. And that goes for a lot of impact investing companies. They're going to go through a lot of regulations and a lot of turns. So can you get enough investment in this impact that you're making that is going to be able to extend 5 to 10 years of receiving investment, that is going to eventually have one of these companies that's been doing it the wrong way for the entire time to eventually take on the impact that has been building that you're investing in. And so I guess there's a lot of different avenues of risk that get pulled into this.
Yeah. Maria, maybe?
Yeah, maybe I completely agree with both of you. Maybe I would like to add that, and I am not a professional investor, I am a business angel, so the approach is completely different, right? But for me, one of the things that but I am a freak, because I am a freak. I have my Excel sheet with all the risk and all the due diligence and so on, right? So my only point here is to be consistent, right? So when you are doing your due diligence and you define which one is your risk, one of these, any investment, it's going to be like a 10-year journey between you and whatever is startups. So that means that you need to be consistent with whatever you decided that was in the due diligence and monitor that over those 10 years and try to make actions to ensure that those risks go down the more than you can. And I completely agree with Jeffrey, depending who is going to be in the next phase, depending how is the regulation, depending, so many things is going to affect that investment. But the more consistent you are and the more you monitor it once a year, or the more disciplined you are in that monitoring, it's going to decrease your risk for that particular startup. And be consistent how you monitor that risk across your portfolio. It's important as well, because sometimes those things that we think are the best on our portfolio, or the top 10 in our portfolio, when you go down in the risk, maybe are not, right? So if you are consistent in how you analyze your risk, you can see that quite easy.
Yeah. I saw a nice example in Estonia. There they created a fairly big living lab in which people were, companies, impactful technologies providers were allowed to run their solutions in a living lab for a year, allowing things to happen, also allowing things to fail. They had this cabinet of famous failures. So people proudly introduced their failure, but more important, they also proudly introduced their learnings. And then the discussion with Estonian government started on how to manage those risks for the next time and see if you can improve on that one. Because, well, then you start, it's so difficult to have on the very challenging topics to have proven technology if there's no way to prove it. So those living lab environments are essential, and then you need the collaboration with, let's say, government, knowledge institutes, universities, but also the investor scene to test drive new things and see what happens. But, well, you have to dare to take a risk, and we are, well, pretty much risk averse. So there is some challenges over there.
It's interesting. They say that angels and investors have the best pattern recognition on the planet because we're able to see from all of the past investments and failures and businesses that are around us that are pitching us, and we start to build patterns around everything, what we don't want to touch, what we don't want to see. We create barriers, walls, etc., because we've recognized this throughout time. Which is the similar to what you're sharing on these labs, is that as you start to go, you get the learnings and you keep refining that process to get to the best outcome or the best output. Yeah. And I think with investing, it's very similar. It's what are you learning? But it can't deter you from investing in a company because you had 3 other water companies approach you and you invested in 2 and they failed. That doesn't mean a 3rd one won't succeed. It just matters that you can take that experience and learning and implement that into the 3rd one, and hopefully that's what brings that success. So I think there's a lot of value in investing right away and starting young and doing it all the way through, because you're going to gain so much knowledge and ability to be able to steer and navigate through all of the nuances in investing.
Yeah, well, talking about myself, I have this gray beard, but I learned that the youngsters, people that, let's say, early 30s and 20s, that they have a complete different view because they're completely different educated to taking challenges and risks. Also, how they manage data so differently than we do. And we have to find ways in order to also bring that in balance, that it's not only the gray hair that decide, because that's what most of the time happens, because, well, you have most experience, or oh, well, that's debatable. But from that perspective, if you bring in the youngsters to keep you challenged every time again, you might be surprised. You will be surprised, and that also we should, well, bring in some kind of a governance kind of thing, that if you take upon a investment, that you have that also overlooked by a complete different team.
Or it's integrating schools and others into the process, like even today, having young people learn about this process, learning how investing works or the way everybody else thinks. It's hugely impactful and important, because it does help you make different decisions, and it doesn't just have to be on should we use TikTok or whatever. Like, it's so much more beyond that on what a consumer is using. It's more of how are they thinking of investments, or thinking of how the world's going to work in the next 10 years. Because as we age, we become narrowly focused, and their broad view at 20 is completely different to our narrowed view at 40 and 50.
Absolutely. Are there other angel investors on the call that could, let's say, elaborate a bit on their experiences on this?
I can have a short word. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm currently also angel investor with Core Angels Lisbon, but I also have my private angel investments, investees, and I have other portfolio investments. What I more and more realize as time goes by is that, in contrary to Maria Desculpen, I'm less and less interested in P&L, and I'm more and more interested in creating a long-term impact, because I have the funding, I have the money, I have financial stability. So it's interesting, and I have a diverse portfolio. So I have some securities built in, but I also I don't invest in certain areas. And it's becoming more and more apparent to me that specifically angel investors, and there is a big correlation with entrepreneurship. And I think that Rui Falcão just wrote an article, or published an article about the correlation between being an entrepreneur yourself and angel investing is very strong. So I more and more rely on my gut feeling. And what I truly am enjoying or believing as a good investment, instead of looking at Excel spreadsheets and P&L, because that is a short term, and of course you don't want to be in charity, so you want to have some return on investment, but that can also be a non-financial return on investment. It's more or less a stewardship for the future. And what we leave to our next generation. But yeah, interesting discussion.